Hey there, this is Dr. Pam Perry. So we are here on Get Out There, Get Known podcast today. And I'm excited because there's a young lady, a journalist, broadcast journalist, that's going to be joining us talking about her books. This is one that actually won a Gracie Award for her series on BIN, Black Information Network. And then this book here that talks about her journey being a broadcast journalist and being a Black woman in her hair journey. And it's so interesting. Not another book like this out here ever. And so we're going to be talking with her right after this. I'm going to bring up Esther Dillard.
Welcome to the Get Out There and Get Known podcast. Join Pam Perry, veteran PR strategist, Emmy Award-winning producer and publisher of Speakers Magazine, who will show you how to crack the code in getting out there to get known. Each week, she either interviews her media friends, PR colleagues, or she just goes solo, offering you strategies on publicity, publishing, and platform building. So listen up to hear how to get booked on media places and on superstar stages. Now, here's your host, Pam Perry.
Okay, so this show is about Esther, but I want to say in full disclosure, I know her through her husband. They're like a power couple in media, right? And so Skip used to be in Detroit at WJLB way back in the day. And so I realized that Skip and Esther are married, right? Like within the last, I would say probably Esther within the last few years, I kind of realized that. But regardless of that, let me tell you about Esther. Okay, so Skip, we put him on another show on another day. So Esther is a journalist and an anchor with Black Information Network, BIN, which is owned by iHeart Radio. She's worked as a reporter for more than 12 years in all markets, including in Buffalo. She was in Flint, she was in Philly, and she was in San Francisco. And for years, she's been reading and sharing with others about the needs of special needs community. In this book that I have right here, she's conducted interviews with experts, autistic adults, and parents of autistic teens to get some expert advice, because the name of this book is Raising an Autistic Young Adult. She's sharing her research with other parents that can benefit. And really, the stories in this book will inspire and provide strategies that people who are autistic in their family, but can use today. And she's often offers added perspectives from the Black and Latino parents, as different cultural differences, and then also really talks about some of the challenges that they share growing up. She's the right person to write this book because of her experience as a mom of an autistic teenager and a journalist who cares about providing clear and source information. That's the key, source information, where readers can use for solutions immediately when addressing their unique circumstances. So that's one book. The other book is called Embracing My Black Natural Hair, which is her first book. So we're going to talk about how this busy woman can even like write 2 books and also have this full-time job and also doing other things as a mom and a wife. And, you know, you must got a cape in the back over there. You know, it's like,
a lot of prayer, honey, a lot of prayer.
Because this particular book won you the award for the Gracie Award for the series that you did on BIN.
Yeah.
So that's really, really big. And so for those of you who don't know, the Gracie Award is about 50 years old. She's going to be honored in a few weeks in Los Angeles, in Beverly Hills.
Yes, Beverly Hills.
In Beverly Hills. That's kind of a cool thing.
Yes,
and it's a really big deal. I think it's put on by the Alliance of Women in Media, or just Alliance of Women in Media. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Alliance. And so when you think about 50 years ago, it's like there were not a lot of really African Americans winning that award. So you were probably like some of the few that have graced getting that Gracie Award. So that's congratulations and kudos to you there. And then this particular book talks about your journey and knowing that you have to be on TV every single day. Black women are judged by their hair. You know, that's somebody, I am not my hair. Well, in TV, you are your hair, okay? Because people will write in, call.
Oh, yeah.
Pick it maybe sometimes.
Terrible things. Oh, email, phone calls back in the day when they used to leave a phone call and a message. Oh, terrible.
Oh my God. And this was before the Crown Act. The Crown Act really kind of.
Well, no, actually that was, I wrote the book after the Crown Act was enacted, and people were trying to get it enacted federally, but they haven't gotten it federally enacted. It's only in about, I forget how many states now, but it's more than a dozen states now.
Right. And the Crown Act really is just saying that you can't discriminate someone based on their hair, on their crown. And that's that you would think like really we need a law for that. But yeah, you know that we do need a law for that. So let's talk about this book first and the series that you did. That's kind of like the main thing that I really want to talk about.
Well, it was after the death of George Floyd. First, I want to say thank you. Thank you for allowing me on your program. And the reason why I did write the series at first was after the death of George Floyd, I had a concern about how I should prepare my son if he were to encounter a police officer in a tense situation. So I looked for a book that I could find, and there really wasn't anything that kinda dealt with, that subject and, Black children, especially Black children on the spectrum. So I reached out to a few parents and said, "Would you be willing to share with me what you did to kinda prepare your son or your daughter, when it came to this?" And they were like, "Yeah, feel free, I'd love to." And so then I pitched it to the Black Information Network. They loved the idea. And, so I found not only parents, I found, adults on the autism spectrum, I found medical professionals and educators to just talk about, staying safe when it comes to your autistic adult, because once, they stop looking cute, a Black boy starts to look like a man, and they can be 13 or 12 or 14, and they're considered they people address kind of treat them like adults when they're not adults. They're just young adult. They're young teenagers. They're becoming adults. So that's
Mhm.
why I won the award based on a four-part series addressing that particular subject. And then along the way, I started doing interviews with other people, not other people, but the same parents, kind of extrapolating, coming out of that particular conversation and going into education and bullying and dating and all these
Mhm.
things. I was like, this is interesting. So would you mind talking to me outside of my work? And so we kept recording, and that's how the book came about. So I address a lot of different subjects that I think that parents with young adults, young teenagers, they may have those interesting questions, because there are books out there that deal with raising autistic young adults, but they don't really have a Black and brown perspective. And that was what I was hoping for, because even though many things do cross culture, they are cross cultural, and uh, other books do address raising your child that is on the autism spectrum. Many times they don't have that Black and brown perspective, and that was what I wanted to bring out in this book.
Because the subtitle is A Parent's Guide to ASD Safety, Communication, Employment Opportunities to Empower Black and Brown Caregivers and Their Families. And so, one of the things, just generally for a mother raising a Black son, is just different.
Yeah.
And there are conversations that mothers will have to have with their Black sons, especially if they're driving and they're stopped by the police. So, say for instance, they're stopped by the police, there's certain things that they know they have to address versus like maybe I wouldn't have to address my daughter so much because one, they get if they get out the car, they're going to be maybe 6 feet tall, they're going to be big. They seem threatening. They seem threatening to a police officer. And if maybe even if they go to work or try to get a job, they seem threatening just because maybe they're bigger or it just the prejudice. Let's just say, let's just put it out there, just because of the prejudice, just in general for African
Mm,
American males, and that is true. I find that for Esther, my godsons, both of them graduated from college, same as my daughter. It was harder for them in the same career, in this almost the same type of experience, for them to find a job versus my daughter. And for one godson, it was, the second godson was like, what is going on? And it is different. And so the cultural differences of how African American males are perceived is really different. And then I can't imagine if they're on the spectrum for autism, how they're perceived. And that's with any kind of thing, if they have Down syndrome or any of that. Stephanie Mills, Stephanie Mills, her son has Down syndrome. I think he's 19 now at this point,
mm,
and there are just certain things that she's working on a book with him, and then she's working on her own book. But there's certain prejudices, I guess you would say, when people see him. And so,
Mhm.
tell me about some of the experiences maybe that your son has encountered in terms of the job search. Let's start there, like with the job search. We won't go in the dating thing. That's a whole
Well, you
nother
know what?
thing. That's the show.
He is he is only 15, so he hasn't started that whole search yet. So I wanted to
Okay.
make sure that when I did this research that I was kinda getting ahead of the game, before he got to that point, and I just wanted to
Mhm.
hear from parents to see, what were their main sticking points? What were some of their things that, that they had to deal with? And it's interesting, I think a lot of people, when they think of someone on the autism spectrum or just being neurodivergent, they have this, concept of someone that is Rain Man, that
Yeah.
old movie, that character,
Mhm.
and it's
Mhm.
not
Dustin Hoffman.
necessarily that
Mhm.
person, that kind of character, not that that isn't a representation of one aspect of neurodivergence, but there are people that have ADHD, that have dyslexia, like Whoopi Goldberg or Questlove, those who are like Amanda Gorman, who have a speech processing disorder. There's a wide range when it comes to neurodivergency, and this community is extremely large and very diverse. And when
Mhm.
it comes to the cultural competency of many of the medical professionals, it ranges as well. So many parents find themselves sometimes frustrated in finding people whom they can connect to be able to talk to them about various things that they're dealing with, in the medical community as well as in the educational community. So it's becoming a more of a conversation among parents that they want to share. They want to let other parents that are now just coming up into this world. They have little ones, but when you move into that adulthood stage, that teenage stage, it's a whole different game, and it's really good for us to talk to each other.
Mhm. I have a friend. She's in California, and I think she's a part of. There's two people I know. I think Holly Robinson P. She has a foundation,
I
and I
love
want to say Ariva um, Martin. She has one as well, and both of them happen to be in California. So I don't know what that's about, but they have foundations. But one of the things that when her and sometimes they kind of say this a little bit, that autism seems to affect boys more so than girls. And I didn't know that until she had her daughter. And she said every time she would put her in a program, she would be like the only girl. I was like, "Ugh, that's, not only does she have this, but now she's like the only girl." So really, she was on a different spectrum. She's very, very super smart. She's now like 24, 25. She raised her, and basically she had to rearrange her life. Uh, the career that she thought she was going to have, she couldn't. She's a single mom. And so, being from Detroit and living in LA, she didn't have a support system. So a lot of things that she did, she had to she worked from home way back when working from home wasn't a cool thing.
Yeah.
And her daughter now is in college, living on her own, doing the things that, quote unquote normal people do. But it wouldn't have been that way if she didn't really, I'd say, just make the sacrifices that she had to do. And so talk about some of the things that you had to do personally, when you first found out about the diagnosis of your son, and then what a parent typically would do first. Do they go to an association? Do they go to a foundation? What do they do? And then how did you manage to your support system helps as well. So what did you do?
I wanna address one thing that which you said, that more boys are diagnosed with autism, and I think that there are people that are speaking out that there needs to be a better way in which to evaluate girls who are on the autism spectrum, because they often have different ways in which, showing that they are on the spectrum. So that's something that's definitely, people are trying to address more and more, because they're saying that it's not just a boys thing, that it is often girls, but girls often present differently and have different aspects that they have to deal with. As far as for
Mhm.
me, when Nicholas was very small, he would often not make a lot of eye contact. He loved to do spinning, and he was pretty much echoalic. which means that he would repeat everything I say. So when I
Mm,
would talk to him, I say, most children, when you start to work with them, they start to respond back and forth. They parrot you, but they do respond in some ways. Nicholas would only respond in a repeat.
mm,
But I knew that he was very smart because he would look at Sesame Street episodes, and sometimes he would do a complete skit repeating everything. And I was like everything, like he learned the script, all the different parts.
wow.
And I was like, "Okay, so there's something going on in there, in that head of his." And so after, a period of time of, doing some reading, kinda concerned, talking to my in-laws because both my parents are passed away. My in-laws really didn't want me to go for doing a lot of, evaluation because they felt
Mhm,
like what they had learned as far as many Black boys, they have been, put into, special education classes because, uh, of their behavior. But I knew that there was something else that needed to be addressed, so I kind of reached out to, a different foundation in New Jersey, and they suggested that I try, looking into different hospitals and doctors and gave me some recommendations. So then I set up an appointment. It took several months to get on this list, and which is a very difficult thing for a lot of Black and brown parents is that there are not enough practitioners to do these evaluations. So they have
mm,
very, very long waiting lists,
wow.
which makes it very difficult for parents, because a lot of times you wanna get that diagnosis between 2, 3 years old, before they go into the kindergarten, 1st grade and such, because then you're missing milestones.
Mhm,
So he did get a diagnosis at about 4 years old,
okay.
and I was able to, start that whole process, but before I got that process, because I was trying to do work part-time and get him into like a preschool and such. He got kicked out of, like, 3 different
Mhm,
preschools. One
mm.
was a
Same
Catholic
with my
one, one
friend.
was a Montessori, I forget it was
Mm,
another program that and I was getting very frustrated because Nick was not listening. He would, run off, and they were like, "We can't handle this. This is not,"
they weren't equipped,
to
right.
handle it. So, and one of the directors pretty much pulled me aside and said, "Look, you gotta go get him a diagnosis." And at that time, I was just waiting like a few more weeks before he was had a scheduled appointment. And eventually, we got his diagnosis, and it was kind of a relief. I knew that something was up, but I wanted to get an official diagnosis,
Right,
which helped a lot. From then on, it
relief.
was like the key was opening the door to different help in terms of public schools. But you have to really look for the right public schools because some public schools don't offer as much, help in this regard. So it is a challenge for a lot of parents these days who are really seeking help.
And it really does matter too when you think if someone is Black and brown, and maybe they may be in the low income area, so their school may not have those resources because you live in a different area, and just that whole part. And so now it affects the education, all the other things that they need to communicate better, they need to be prepared for work and prepare for college. All of those things now affect that. And so the pivotal point that you kind of said a little bit of why the book really, you started with the series after the George Floyd murder, and really, it just came to light where people had to really understand that there are differences of how people are viewing Black men in the world. And it wasn't just George Floyd, it was a lot more before George Floyd, but that was just like the one that really just made everybody go out in the street and march.
Yeah.
And so starting with that, the whole point I want to say is that it was brave for you to write the book, right? Because now you have to now you're doing it from a journalist standpoint, but then also too is personal at a
Yeah.
certain point too. So it like you said, you had the relief at the beginning when you had the diagnosis. Now I know what to do. But then while you're doing all the interviews, how many people did you interview for the book,
I
roughly?
think in total, I had about 12 or so, and I could have had so many more, but I knew that I just wouldn't have enough time to to do all the editing and everything else, to make it work. And so, one of the people that I guess that really stood out for me, a great story, is a woman by the name of Jane Broby. Her son is non-speaking,
Okay.
and
He's in different spectrum.
when she was really young, when he was really young, she would just communicate with him by putting pictures on her refrigerator, and then he would point to pictures to kind of communicate with her. And her school pretty much told her that her son was intellectually disabled and that he would never be able to really do much, because he was failing all his evaluations. And she was very upset. She was like, "He's intelligent. I know because I'm able to communicate with him. He just doesn't talk." So
Mm-hmm.
she did some research and she had somebody who pointed her to a system called spelling. And that spelling, the instructor pretty much said, "Take this stuff home. I want you to work with your son. He can do all these kind of things." And she said it was really involved. And she was like, "My son's not gonna be able to do this." And the person said, "Yes, he can." And so she said, "Okay, I'll challenge her," and did it. And she brought it home and she said, "My son thrived." And she said she had to explain to the school administrators and the teachers that with some kids who are non-speaking, when they look down at a horizontal surface for his particular condition, when he looks down at a horizontal surface, he cannot read it or understand it or comprehend it. But when he looks up and looks at a vertical surface, he is able to do well. So they retested him using a vertical surface where he was able to answer, and he thrives. Now he is thriving so much. She homeschools him and
Mm-hmm.
he's taking college courses. So
Wow.
he can still, being non-speaking, being on the autism spectrum doesn't necessarily mean that you're not intelligent. You have to learn how to do things a little bit differently. Your map as a parent is going to be, you're going to have to forge your way and figure out what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. And sometimes it doesn't necessarily look like what everybody else is doing. And that was why I hoped that in reading the book, people would kind of get that one main nugget, is that
Mhm,
don't discount how your journey is or your particular way you're doing it as being wrong. It doesn't necessarily have to be wrong. It's just right for you.
mhm,
And sometimes your story and your ability to share with somebody else who's going through a similar situation can help them.
mhm. That is really like the main thing, that everyone is different. Just like if someone has ADHD, right? And they're diagnosed with that. And I know people who have been diagnosed with that later in life, like in their 50s. And
Mhm.
it's like they have a
And that's
whole
on the spectrum.
yes, it's in a whole association of adults with ADHD. And it was like I didn't know that's what I had, because in the school systems they were treating them differently and they couldn't really work with it. There's a person, Gloria Mayfield Banks, and she says this all the time as part of her story. She's dyslexic, and so her mother was a teacher, and her other two sisters were always bright and doing good things, but she was just different. Finally, she was diagnosed, and they realized that she learned differently than them. And she went on and went to Harvard. Okay. She went to Howard and then she went to Harvard. But it wasn't until they realized that she had to just learn a system differently than her other two sisters. And her mother was a teacher. And she couldn't figure out like why Gloria was just always just doing things differently. And it was because of that. So I just find that people need to parents, grandparents, aunts, anyone within the family, part of the tribe of someone that is on the spectrum for autism, to get this book. It's a series that you have that you want an award for, but the book itself is just really good. And you have, because you did the research, you have a lot of resources in the back. Of
Mhm.
course, it's like okay, it's pages and pages of resources that are really really good, because you obviously did the research and you did the interviews, but you also did the resources as well. Now, last year, also wrote another book called "Embracing My Black Hair: A Guide to a from a Former TV Reporter Who Went Natural." Okay, and so we kind of talked a little bit about what prompted you. The calls, people would leave voicemail messages and that kind of thing. But what I want to ask, kind of like we have a few minutes left, what were the challenges of writing two books back to back? Okay. That part right there is like, because again, you have a lot of resources in the back of this book as well. It's like, Skip is like, she is really doing a lot of research, because it's not like this is what you do full time. You also have another full time of a
Yeah.
whole journalism career, a whole career. So you're doing this as well. So, and I love the pictures in it as well, because it actually shows some of the things that just so that people can see the different looks of Esther, right? Whether it's wigs, weaves,
Yes, I did it all, honey.
what color,
Did
just
it all.
yeah.
It's funny
So
that I think
yeah.
the reason that the one of the things that I guess I took as being a really main part of the reason why I did the book was because I really wanted to figure out why I hadn't done it earlier, because this has been such a very
Freeing.
relieving freedom journey, and it's freed me from doing always worried about my hair, and it was
Mhm.
simply because I had to learn that there has been a long history of discrimination against Black women when it comes to doing their hair having to be covered up, changed in order to be straightened for the
Tell
white male-dominated society to accept you just making a living.
Mhm,
And that's
mhm.
what it is, really what it is. How I got both of them done, it was before AI exploded,
Okay, yeah,
so
it's
I
no,
did a lot of the
these are
research
not
myself.
ChatGPT's books, okay? These are
It
this
was
is
bef
like a real journalist, okay? Real research. So, yeah.
I did I it was before AI hit, so I was really kinda doing a little bit at a time. I would do some late at night, do some in the morning, but the big thing that helped me a lot as far as the second book was, me recording all the
Yeah,
interviews, and I
yes.
was able to take and extract that information and then do more research and then add it in. The
Yeah.
first one was totally me sitting down for embracing my black natural hair. I sat down for a couple of days in a row. I would just get up, do a couple of hours, go get lunch, do something else, and then come back and write some more. And I did that for a couple of weekends, to make it happen. So that's how I got the 2 books done. And then, I hired an editor to help
Yeah.
me as far as that was
We can
concerned.
never edit our own stuff.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
then it was helpful for them to do all the citing and everything else, so then I would not screw it up, but
Mhm.
it was a journey, it really was.
This is so needed. I was showing my hairdresser the book, and there's one particular chapter in here talks about the cost for maintenance, the cost for all of that. And so I was just telling that you had the sister lots, and this, and she says, "Do you know that is a very expensive process?" She said, "Well, she says no, starting at probably 1,500." I'm like,
Yeah, when I
"What?"
started, it was much cheaper, but yeah, it was pricey, and
Yeah,
at the time, I was unemployed, and I
it's
said, "Baby,
pricey.
can you help me out?" And he helped me out, thank God, and I don't look back at all.
It's a
I don't
commitment.
wanna press it, I don't wanna put any chemicals in it, especially now with the concerns about chemicals and connections to
Hmm.
cancer and
Yeah.
everything else. I'm just so glad, 'cause, that I don't do that anymore, and at this point, I
Mhm.
remember it affected me. A lot of people don't talk about it, I don't think, but, for me, I had foggy brain. Every time I would get my
Mm.
hair done with the
The part,
chemicals, it
yeah,
would
with the
I would be kind of foggy, like, the next day, it's because of how the chemicals, I guess, affected how all
mhm.
that. So,
It
I
goes
wonder
into your
if more
bloodstream.
people. Hmm?
It goes into your bloodstream.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
In the blood, that's part of that's running through yeah, that part. And
Yeah.
so the part that I like about the book is that you talk, it's very personal about your story, but then it also gives other people ideas on what to do. I remember from Detroit, that we had some anchors here. We had Beverly Payne, uh that wore her natural hair, but her hair was long and she probably had to press it. But then we also had the other anchor, Karma Harlan. Again, she wore her natural hair, so I'm sure her hairdresser made a whole career probably keeping her hair together. But then we also had Diana Lewis, in Detroit, who's the ABC network, and she wore wigs the entire career. And when she first started, people were like, "Oh my God, she has on a wig," and she was like, "I'm gonna wear this wig," and I'm sure that gave her freedom. They were good wigs, but that was a thing that was like more discussion about her and her wigs than really her news. And I mean, she was Emmy Award winning journalist, but it was a thing for Black women. And I don't think any of the other anchors, that were on at the time, white women, ever had that conversation. Like, who was even talking about their hair? So,
But now the
yeah.
freedom of a lot of Black women, it's so nice to see. It's so
Mhm.
empowering to see so many Black women wearing braids and twists and dreads. I screamed when I first saw a Black man with dreads. I think it was on CNN and he was reporting. I was like, "Ah,
Oh
yes!"
my God.
It was
They have the
so
freedom to do
exciting.
that.
It
Yes.
it's liberating, and I don't
Yeah.
know, you know?
That between that and size, there's a lot of size differences too. It's a whole nother conversation. But I remember one uh a Latino woman in Texas, I believe. People were always saying you wear your clothes too tight, whatever, whatever. And she was just curvy. And that whole, I can't remember her name, but the whole thing about, yeah, we're gonna have a little bit more on us than most. I can't like go down and do the skinny thing. So I mean, she became, how do I say, famous. She went viral about her rebuttal to people about her size. It's like, I'm gonna have this, I'm gonna have this, and it's not gonna go away. What would you tape it down or what? It's like this is this. So much of things that we see that are problems, there's solutions, or there, what I would say, there's books
Yeah.
as well. So I love books. That's why I do the Amazon Live. I think that every problem there's a book, and if there isn't um, a solution in that book, then that means you need to write that book, which is what you
Right.
do.
Yeah.
You write the book. It's like, you know what? There's some issues here. Let's dive in deep. And then this is the one where you really lead people down the right path in terms of any kind of situations, or you're just like an advocate. You're an advocate. You're an advocate for people who want to know more about, getting in broadcasting with their hair. It's like, oh, should I on my reel, should I have natural hair? Should I have braids? Now it's just kind of like, okay, let's talk about this. And then also too, as there's a lot of books about people, parents who have children who are autistic and they're little. But what about as they get older? And then what if they are, culturally different? So this is one of the things too that I just love that you did. It's like you find a niche and you fill it, and then you just happen to win an award with it. So that's good. Good to be
Thank
rewarded for the things that you just feel passionate about.
Yeah,
So that,
yeah.
thank you.
And I really hope that encourages anybody else who has an idea or a passion that they wanna share, that, you have a story and you can share it as well.
Yeah, yeah. And I want people to go, they can read the show notes later, but I want them to go to esterdillard.com. And what will they find when they go there?
They will find, all of my books that I have produced, as well as, even a, short, like, activity book that my husband and I put together, and it has to do with hip hop and fun, so
Yeah.
that's another book that's on there as well.
Oh, cool, cool. Well, I've got to have Skip on, and maybe he can talk about that book. And he's always been very kind, very nice, and he has done so much in his career, and you too as well. So
Thank
I
you.
just appreciate both of you all, what you stand for. You haven't wavered. You're really strong in terms of advocating for those in Black media as well, the Black press. It's just really good to see you. So I was so excited to have you on because I was like, you have got to get out here on this show and talk about these things that you are doing. I'm really, really excited about it. So I want people to get the books. They can go to esterdillard.com and find out more about her, connect with her, maybe ask you, do you go on speaking engagements and things like that?
In fact, I have a couple of things coming up that, I'm gonna be putting on my website, but I have putting it on social media, so if you find me on social media, on LinkedIn or on Facebook or Instagram, I'm also posting about that, but there's an event coming up with Taraji P. Henson, her
Yeah.
foundation,
Oh,
yeah, and they're gonna be doing it in the Baltimore, Maryland area, so I'll be on a panel talking about, this thing, about the autism spectrum
yeah.
and parents and solutions, and it's really a community that is growing because there's a lot more kids that are being diagnosed, and so there's gonna be a lot more adults out there that are needing solutions.
Thank you. Thank you. I love that. I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I knew that you were going to be speaking and going around and advocating on this as well. And then congrats again on the Gracie Award. I'm sure we'll be seeing pictures on the gram of you on the red carpet doing the thing there. That's going to be fun. That's going to be fun. So please tell your hubby I said hi as well. This has been really, really good. Okay.
Thank
Alrighty.
you.
Take care. Alrighty. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. That was excellent. Excellent. So make sure that you go and get the books plural, and then go to esterdillard.com. So with that, I'm Pam Perry and I'm out. Thanks for joining us today. Like, share, and subscribe.
You've been listening to the Get Out There and Get Known podcast, brought to you by PamPerryPR.com, where you'll get insider tips on how to build your platform, pitch the media, and promote yourself with confidence. Head over to PamPerryPR.com and get the exclusive video training on the 7 must-have marketing materials you need before you pitch in order to be considered in media places or superstar stages. PamPerryPR.com.